might look something more like this, where we could sort of sense that there are two distinct groupings. The problem for us becomes how we are going to find these factions in the data. As I've already sort of shown you, the actual data is much more complicated than simple drawings. So the way we're going to look for factions is to draw on the network analysis literature on community detection. So following Mark Newman, we've been using these automated community detection methods for finding communities, or in our case, communities are factions within the party network. So what this automated method does is it finds a community and then measures the modularity of the community. Here, the modularity is given by half the sum of M, where half the sum of all the ties is the total strength of the network. A is the adjacency matrix, which measures the individual, the dyadic tie between two members. K is simply the strength or weighted degree of each node. And finally, S is simply a function that measures whether two members of Congress or two nodes are in the same community. So what you get is this measure Q, a modularity score, which measures how strong the ties are within each community. And so we use an algorithmic search function to find good communities, measure the modularity, and try and find the configuration of communities that provide for the highest modularity score. So we try and find the groupings of members of Congress that would provide for the deepest factions or the strongest factions based on their contribution pattern.
So most money contributed within the community makes a higher modularity.
Yes, exactly. And within the social network analysis literature, this is a theoretically rigorous score of doing it. There were older methods to look for clicks that were perhaps less rigorous. Maybe this is kind of state of the art. James Fowler has a group at San Diego that is using modularity scores to look for factions in the roll call matrix. But we are going to use it to look for factions in the contribution matrix. So here's a famous network, and using the modularity scores and community detection, researchers were able to survey members of this karate club and find the ties between them. And interestingly enough, soon after the survey took place, the karate club split into two. And the community detection measures and modularity correctly identified the split in the karate club after the fact. So the problem for us becomes we have these much sparser networks. We have to maybe search a little bit harder, and so we have begun that process. So here's our most modular, the highest modularity scored data or network in our data set. It's the Republican Contribution Network in 1990. You can see that there are some fairly distinct groupings in the network structure. Now, the modularity score for this network is 0.35, which is less than the Karate Club modularity. I'm not sure these numbers are very intuitive or useful, but that's around 0.419. But this is a more modular, more factionalized network than any of the other networks we have in our data set. The key thing that makes, I think, the research project most useful is we get to observe change over time. So we don't have to simply look at one network and try and debate whether it is well scored or useful, but we can compare these different scores over time. So what the algorithm does, again, is it tries to find good communities, calculates a score, and then stops when it finds the highest score that's found. So when we look at the scores over time, we see a very distinct trend for each party, where parties were more factionalized in the mid-'80s than they are today. There's a clear secular decline in the modularity scores. There's some other interesting features, I think, to the scores. Overall, they are fairly low. They are never very high compared to something that like that karate club network. And now they are quite low. So a modularity score of 0 implies that there's no communities to be found in the data, that they would be highly unified, and we can't increase the strength of the ties of any groups by splitting them up. I think something that is interesting in contrast to the roll call literature is that oftentimes the Democrats seem sort of more unified, which would imply more homogeneous than the Republicans. So when we look at the roll call data sets, it is always the Republicans that are more homogeneous, and the Democrats often appear quite heterogeneous. So even at sort of the tail end of the Southern Democrat era, in Congress, they still have a lower modularity, the Democrats. Additionally, the first time the Republicans really achieve a low modularity score, interestingly enough, is the famous or infamous 1994 Republican Revolution. So modularity seems to decrease quite a bit, suggesting perhaps that an important coordination was solved for by the Republican Party as part of the process of them achieving a majority takeover of the House. So this is sort of where we are with the modularity story. I think that there's still, perhaps, we could try a little bit harder to search for better communities. I think it is sort of flattening out based on the searches we have done. But I have been running most of them on my laptop, and maybe it is time to run the searches on a more powerful computer. So we're sort of happy with these results, I guess, at the time being. The other thing we are quite interested in, of course, is who gets to lead these party coalitions. So here are the top givers. This is just a slice of the network. Oftentimes when you look at these network analysis papers, they won't show you the whole network because theirs are ugly too. But they figure out a neat way to slice the network, so they just show you the interesting bits. So here we have tried to play that game. And we are just showing you the top givers, the top 3 givers in the Republican network from 2003 to 2004. And so the top 3 givers, in sort of a not surprising sense, Tom DeLay, Dennis Hastert, and Bill Frist. And what you can see is, while there are many members of Congress that they are giving to in common, there are plenty of members of Congress that they don't share giving in common. There's sort of all those nodes that only have one tie directed to them. So the big question for us is to understand how that sparseness translates into the politics we care about. Yes?
Maybe you can see down there, but we can't see from up here. Where are each of those 3 individuals located?
Okay, so I'm going to wander about. So do you see the red bars?
We can see the red bars. I can't read them though.
So the red bars are at the nodes of these 3 folks, as you might imagine. So this is Tom DeLay.
Okay.
This is Dennis Hastert. And if I was Shaquille O'Neal, maybe that would be Bill Frist up there.
Thank you.
I think, like a lot of these networks, I often wonder how much intuition can be gleaned from looking at the pictures. But again, when you read these papers, they are often all about the pictures. So we want to have plenty of pretty pictures. But what we really want to know is who is at the center of the network. And we look into the literature on prominence, measures of prominence, and the big measures are centrality and closeness. We use Carter Butt's modified closeness measure, which asks, can the member of Congress reach every other member of Congress How long is the path between